This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hello everyone. If you're new to my channel, my name is Yana and I am a full-time artist who flops back and forth between digital and traditional mediums. And the artwork in this video is my transition back to ink, watercolor, and colored pencils. Hope you enjoy watching the process. For these illustrations, I tried out this set of eco-friendly brushes called Strathmore. They are pretty nice and I would generally recommend them. I've definitely used a couple of other sets of brushes before that weren't particularly different, but this brand really focuses on the eco-friendly aspect, which is pretty good, I suppose. And so if you're interested in these brushes, just check out my description and I'll put some more info there. But yeah, it has been a long time since I have made traditional art, and by long time I mean like several months or so. Maybe it's not that long for other people, but it certainly feels like forever to me. And I was on a long streak with digital art this year, mostly due to an equipment upgrade, but also I did a lot of freelance work this summer, which is almost always digital for me, unfortunately. But yeah, at this point I have really missed drawing on paper. And as a result of this long break from traditional art, getting back to it was actually pretty difficult and more stressful than ever before for some reason. And I will tell you a little bit more about that later. Firstly, I'm going to explain what it is that I'm drawing in this particular video. So somehow I started this particular arrangement of objects and characters way back in February or April, I think, which is a very long time ago. But yeah, this is how I make my sticker designs. I have this problem with having no stop signal when it comes to deciding on the scope of a project, which is how I ended up making sticker sets that have 6 full sheets of unique designs on them. And it ended up being something like 50 or 60 illustrations per sticker pack. And thus it probably comes as no surprise that it took forever for me to finish drawing and painting all the designs necessary for my previous sticker set called the Traveler. And what you're looking at here is the second last sheet of designs for the next sticker set that I'm working on, and actually just recently finished, called the Scholar. This set I have been working on basically since the end of last year, I think, or I don't know, sometime beginning of this year. It's been a very long time. Anyways, I edited this video almost entirely by stitching real-time segments together. I did this for 2 reasons, because I rotate the paper like a madman and I'm pretty sure it would make anybody watching a sped up version throw up from motion sickness. And secondly, because I somehow always tend to drift off camera for like 30-40% of the footage at least, which is really sad because I try so hard to capture all the footage, or at least as much of it as I possibly can, and then only to later find out that most of it is actually being drawn off camera. I don't know. I still have to figure out a way to combat that particular problem, but yeah, so this editing actually worked out because obviously I cut out all the parts where I was not drawing on camera, and I think in some ways it's actually more informative than a speed paint version because you can get a more realistic sense of the actual pace of the pace that I work at, which is very relaxed actually, which is generally the opposite of how speed paints tend to come across from my experience anyway. But yeah, at first I wanted to make this video about the process. But then I actually remembered that there was a ton of anxiety surrounding my transition back into traditional art. And so I think it may be more interesting to just talk about that side of things instead and save the process talk for the next one, which I have already finished and have the footage ready to go. Unfortunately, I did take another break from YouTube for a couple of weeks and got inexplicably busy with a bunch of other stuff. So as a result, I had this footage sitting around for a little while, but it gave me some time to think about what led up to me finally getting back into traditional art. And yeah, it also gave me a chance to make some plans. So like I said, for the next one, I will tell you guys more about the process and how I approach planning and drawing these sheets specifically. But in this one, I just wanted to tell you what it was like to finally get back to traditional art after so many months of focusing on digital. I'm just going to take a minute and talk about this video's sponsor, which is Skillshare, as usual. Thank you so much to Skillshare for continuing to sponsor my channel. If you've never tried Skillshare before, I highly recommend you take a look. It's an online learning platform where you can find thousands of classes on a huge selection of topics such as drawing, painting, writing, art, journaling, self-help, freelancing, and so much more. I love how there's been more and more classes recently on various topics related to journaling and self-care and organization. Those are things I personally love and love to watch how other people tend to approach these things. So I recently watched a class called Draw Your Life, Intro to Illustrated Journaling by Mimi Chow. I really like her approach to art journaling. I love how laid back it is. Made me kind of feel at ease to try something similar, and I'm really looking forward to trying to do some illustrated journaling in the future. And she also has a lot of really good tips for how to approach layouts, which is something I personally sometimes get stuck on. So yeah, I really recommend this class if you're interested in illustrated journaling. You can watch this class and hundreds of others on Skillshare by clicking the link in my description and signing up for a free trial. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to use the link below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Skillshare has no ads, and I love that most of the classes are about an hour in length or less sometimes, which can be easily enjoyed over a morning coffee on a weekend or just about any time in the week, and is very easy to fit into a busy schedule. If you use my link to sign up, you'll be helping me out as well, so please check it out in my description. And now on to the rest of the video. So first of all, for some reason I had a lot of anxiety throughout, I don't know, I'm gonna say like maybe from mid-summer, like mid-June or mid-July, and then for the next couple of months, which pretty much coincided with when I was the busiest working on freelance work, and it probably had something to do with it, I would assume. But yeah, anxiety is not something I have experienced a whole lot of in the last couple of years. I guess there's definitely different types of anxiety, and I'm sure all of us have experienced a ton of that in relation to just the general state of the world in the last couple of years, but I don't want to go in that direction. In this particular case, I had no apparent reason to be anxious about anything, which kind of made it worse for me, because usually if I know where anxiety is coming from, it actually makes it a lot easier for me to deal with. But in this particular case, I don't really know what exactly it was, and it kind of made it cross over into the somewhat debilitating range as far as anxiety goes. Like it actually had a negative effect on how I physically feel, so I had some ailments. But anyways, I don't want to focus on that either. But I think this anxiety greatly contributed to making the transition from digital to traditional difficult for some reason. I've never really had too much trouble transitioning before, but I think, I don't know, like this time the resistance was just horrible for me. I had this plan for the sticker sheets sitting around for so long, and I actually did the penciling part of the drawing that you're looking at several months ago, like probably back in April, and it was pretty much ready to go, and I was going to obviously paint it back then. It's very uncommon for me to leave something half finished for such a long period of time, and I think that's probably what contributed to it being so difficult to just getting back to it after so many months of basically ignoring it. And yeah, I was feeling super out of my element, and I know that it's like, it seems so stupid, but for those of you who have experienced like this type of resistance before, where you understand that all you need to do is just start working on something, but you just can't seem to bring yourself to do it. Well, I was dealing with that for like at least a couple of weeks, and yeah, I guess the thing that I wanted to really talk about is how I ended up getting past the resistance of working on this stuff, and I honestly had to really go back and take some super baby steps. Like I literally had to just take the sheet and put it on my desk and just have it sit there for a few days to just be constantly reminded of it, and then eventually I managed to squeeze some time into my schedule in order to get to work at it. And I decided to use watercolor, which was kind of a weird decision for me because you guys probably don't know this, but I tend to work with mostly colored ink like 90% of the time. So and watercolor is something I do not use a lot, but I decided to use watercolor because for this particular illustration I made the lines using a pencil, which is also something I pretty much never do. I usually ink everything before putting the colors in. So I guess maybe that also may have contributed to my inability to start on it, because I was just nervous about the process, and I rely heavily on knowing what the process steps will be in order to feel at ease going forward with a piece. I do a lot of seemingly contradictory things now that I think about it, because I actually tend to jump into stuff like this without planning a whole lot about the colors, and so I just arbitrarily kind of see what works. And maybe you can tell by looking at the way that the coloring of this sort of illustration progresses, is that I just tend to like pick a color and then put it across all the elements little by little, and then I'll pick a different color and do the same thing, so it kind of each one of them get evenly distributed all around the canvas. But I digress. I guess that's one of the reasons why I also had resistance with it, but like I said, taking small steps really helped me. And another thing I wanted to mention was that once I actually finally got to working on it, I had a very difficult time starting. Like, it just seems like everything was working against me at the beginning. Like, I had a hard time mixing the right color for Noelle's hair, and it took me a while to actually do it. And then once I started coloring it in, it just looked weird, and I didn't like how the paint was sitting on the paper. And I thought, like, man, maybe I made the wrong choice with this paper. And it was just like this endless stream of thoughts that completely made it impossible for me to just like zone into working without thinking about all this extra stuff that gets in the way. And so I stopped. I actually worked for about an hour, and then I couldn't go on any longer because I just kept getting distracted by all the things that seemingly kept going wrong. And I took a break. I took about 2 hours to just do something else and think about it. And then when I returned, I decided that it would probably be a good decision to switch from watercolor to colored inks, which seems to be more of a comfort zone thing for me. I noticed that the watercolors that I have too are they must just be really low quality, because for the first time, I noticed that they're really grainy. Like, a lot of the pigments are super grainy, so when I put a lot of water into it and diluted them, I could really see the graininess, and I could kind of almost see it on the paper too, which really started to bother me, which is so strange because I've definitely used them enough times before to have presumably noticed something like this, but I never have. And yeah, I did not want, the first thing that occurred to me is oh, maybe I should buy better quality watercolors, but obviously I decided to just persevere and continue working on this drawing. And I have to say that it does take quite a bit of patience, because it does not start to look the way that I want it to, or the way that I intend for it to look, up until pretty much the last step, at which I start putting in the details with colored pencils. And I have noticed that it takes quite a bit of patience to get to that level, especially when I haven't done it in so long. Yeah, this actually kind of takes me to the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which is just having faith in the process of art in general. And it's something I haven't thought about too much in the past, but I noticed this time that I do rely on that a lot when it comes to making artwork, without having realized it until now, because I tend to have kind of a chaotic process when it comes to coloring. I seldom plan colors ahead, and I never do little studies just to test if something will work out. I tend to just kind of take it one color at a time and just put them together arbitrarily and hope for the best, just using my best judgment as I'm working on it, instead of planning ahead with anything. and somehow it tends to always work out, which is surprising, but also I think it did help me develop a certain level of trust in that process. And thankfully, by the end of this particular piece, I managed to, I guess, reinstate that faith in the process that I seem to have lost somewhere while I was working constantly digitally. Because digitally, it is such a different process, man. Like, just having done it for several months consecutively and having forgotten what it's like to have to really go in blind and just hope for the best without being able to radically change anything is crazy. Like, when I work on things digitally, I will change colors all the time, and like, I really got used to having that freedom of making changes constantly at my disposal. Whereas with this particular process, it was scary to go back into it. But yeah, like I said, I think by the end of this piece, I managed to reinstate the faith that I had previously in just the process and just my ability to still be able to make it work even though it's not perfect. And I do think like that's such an important thing to retain as a general attitude when approaching your artwork, just understanding that things likely won't be 100% perfect, but it's good to just have faith in what it's like and just kind of deal with mistakes as they come and try to make the best of them by just fixing it. And that's pretty much what the majority of traditional art is like for me, because I do relatively unplanned pieces most of the time. And by unplanned, I mean like planned to a certain degree, but not excessively planned. Like, I know many people who do a lot more planning than I do, so I think I'm actually on the more spontaneous side when it comes to these things. But I know it probably doesn't look like it looking at what I'm working on the screen, because for this one, the most of planning that I did was actually just arranging the objects on the sheet so they do fit together nicely and form a nice composition. But aside from that, I did not plan any of the colors or anything like that. So yeah, there was still a lot of spontaneity involved. But yeah, so like I was gonna say, or I guess I should go over how I managed to get through the block. I think it was something like an art block, actually, if I look at it. If I just phrase it differently, I guess. Resistance and art block are not particularly different, I guess. Yeah, just taking baby steps. Like, I had to mentally prepare myself to dive back into traditional art by just like putting this unfinished piece with the line work on it on the desk until I felt like I was ready to finally tackle it, and then allowing myself to take a break when I thought that things were not going in the direction that I wanted them to, and then just coming back to it slowly, and eventually it all seemed to have worked out. So yeah, I know this video is a little bit different from the ones that I've been making generally over the last several months, but for the next one I am planning to focus a lot more on techniques and mediums and why I prefer colored inks over watercolors and things like that. So if some of you don't like these more general topic type of conversations, I guess the next one will be more informative for actual techniques and process. So yeah, thanks so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!